Hey, okay, so this is going to be a real quick sort of walkthrough of where the new features are located. We're not going to go into any depth on this. If you do want some sort of like depth, you can go on over to the Zaxworks website, and if you go to support and blog, you'll find a listing of all the sneak peek movies that came out. Now, the sneak peek movies have a lot of good information in them. We're, of course, going to be doing lots of more in-depth tutorials. But every one of these things where it says watch a product demonstration actually shows you how to turn the features on and off and use all the new features. So it's not all the new features though, so that's what I'm going to be talking to you about here. So once you're here in ProAnimator version 8, there are a few significant things to take a look at. One is so simple, it just blows my mind, but it's so useful. So if we go over to the animation, we've got this new little button right here. This is called the Enable Time Marker Sync button. We used to have an option for this inside the user prefs, which were located right here, but boy, was it a pain having to go in and out. So we put this button right up front because you use it all the time. What it enables you to do is to make changes in these poses or transitions without the time marker having to be locked to the pose and transitions. So for instance, if we were trying to set the look of this, well, let's pick something else. Well, let me show you what's happening right now. First of all, if I click on this to make a change, so that I can make a change to these controls, you see how it snapped the time marker to the beginning of the transition. Well, that's fine. The reason why we did that is because that way you're seeing exactly what it is that the changes are affecting. However, sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want to see what it looks like maybe here, even though you're making changes to the pose later in time. So this is really useful, like if you're doing flies. Like say right here, maybe we wanted the P to go right at us. So in order to do that, say we're going to change this arch direction. Well, as soon as I start changing the arch direction, it snaps everything back to the beginning of the transition, and you see I can't see exactly where that P is anymore. Then I have to move it forward again and say, whoops, I missed it a little bit. So I'm going to change it again. There it snaps, and then, well, no, I didn't quite make that either. So what we do instead is we put it here and then turn off the sync. And at this point, when I make a change, it's going to stay exactly at that point in time. And then I can look at this and go, oh, wow, you know, that's actually, I need to move it a little bit differently. So maybe I go to the last pose, and then I'm going to slide over where the last pose is. And then you see when it moves out at us, we play this back, you see the P will go right at us. And you say, okay, well, there it's going to go through us. Maybe we wanted to go right through that hole, yeah, something like that. So at that point, you see, bang, we've got a transition all set up, and the wipe is going to work the way we wanted it to, and that's because we didn't have to snap the time marker to the time when we're actually adjusting the pose. So that's a really simple one. You can turn it back on, simple one, and then of course, you know, everything works like it usually did. So that's one of those little features that makes working in ProAnimator 8 so doggone much faster. Okay, now on to the other features. The other stuff that we haven't looked at before is that we may have looked at before is this. So let's see. First thing we're going to look at here is this auto render feature. Now, auto render is the thing that lets it put in final render quality right in the viewport. This is fantastic because you will see it with all the bells and whistles, the shading, the shadows, and the ray tracing, the reflections, everything like that as you move it around. The problem, of course, is that it's a real pig in terms of rendering speed. Probably shouldn't say that, but yeah, you know, that's what happens. This one, you see, is actually still in real time because all we're doing here is we're looking at our output controls, and you see it's rendering using OpenGL, and this, by the way, is a really slow Mac. Let me show you. We've been getting comments that people just don't believe it's real time. So let me show you what the specs are on this. It's awful. This is a 4-year-old, well, let's see, yeah, early 2003, 14, yeah, what do we have? 11, 12, 13, 14, 3-year-old. 3-year-old Mac. It's only got 4 gigs of RAM, and it's got 256 megs of VRAM. It's awful. It's well, it's not awful. It used to be, you know, a wonderful machine, but now it's seen its better days. But we use this because it shows problems really quickly. when you turn things on that you shouldn't. For instance, you notice how fast this is, and this is with final anti-aliasing, final shadows. I can come on over here to our lighting globals. Let me open up the lighting panel so that you can see our lighting globals here. We've got ambient occlusion. If I turn on ambient occlusion, you see that's going to slow it down a little bit. Well, I probably need a, let me make a piece of ground too. Okay, so there we go. So now we've got a ground with ambient occlusion and everything else turned on like that. So you see that, that doesn't degrade the speed much at all on this old Mac. Now I will show you what will degrade the speed though. Is if you go to the output and you turn the anti-aliasing up to best, this is going to slow it down significantly. So now there's a little delay and then chunk, 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 chunk. You see it's going to start going through like that. So this is for no visual appearance in the rendering quality as far as interactive mode goes. Turn your anti-aliasing sorry, turn your anti-aliasing up to fast anti-aliasing, and then you see everything is just lickety split, even with ambient occlusion and other things turned on. So that's one thing to keep aware of. Auto render, if you are doing ray tracing, will do an entire ray trace pass on your objects. When you drag them around, it switches back to OpenGL. When you let them go, it switches to ray trace. Now, if you've got a fast enough machine, you can leave it on ray trace all the time, and it looks awesome. You'll see this is actually rendering really fast, so you're not even seeing any of the updates. See this little button up here, show updates while rendering? That's when you'll see those little green checkers go through the scene as it's calculating the ray tracing, stuff like that. We also have a new thing down here called show stats, which will show you nothing because we're in auto render mode. Notice that you're not getting bounding boxes or anything. That's because this is the final picture. All right, but if we turn off auto render, now when we select the objects, you'll see the bounding boxes and you'll also see the stats. Okay, so we've got 11,000 triangles in this particular scene. 4 objects. You'll see as we go along that this can get significantly bigger and still have really good performance. Okay, so let's see. So auto render, yeah, keep your eye on that. If stuff starts to chunk along, just turn auto render off, and it still looks awfully doggone good. I'm in ray trace mode right now. Remember though, it's your final output quality set over here as far as the ray tracer and the anti-aliasing that's going to affect how fast auto render works significantly. All right, so keep that in mind. Next thing to look at is, well, the renderers themselves. So we showed you this real quickly, Ray Tracer or OpenGL. For anyone who's used to our program, we used to have another option here called Invigorator Renderer. That one's gone now. That one's a scanline renderer, and the reason why it's gone is because our Ray Tracer is 25 times faster than the Invigorator renderer ever was. So it is just a screaming banshee, man. It works so fast. Okay, so that's where you select the new renderers. Show updates while rendering. If you can get some speed increases by turning that little guy off. Let's look at some other things here. The lighting globals, there's a lot been added to that. If you don't see it currently, when you click the lighting button down here, you can always open it up and you'll see lighting globals is in your panels list right here. Image-based lighting, you click on this button right there to open up a picture. If you click here, what this will do is this will take you to the SIBL archive. That is out on the web at hdrlabs.com, and these are tons and tons of should have done this before I started recording, but you'll see tons of pictures here which are actual IBL scenes using what you're looking at here. It says people have done, great work doing all this stuff. The thing to remember about IBL rendering is that it will color the objects to look like the scene that you're looking at. So if you have a nice blue sky up here, your objects will end up bluish. This thing right here creates these very, very red scenes. The thing is that if you're using this as the background picture also, then it looks perfectly integrated. But there's a little bit of care that you have to pay attention to that. These things are also really, really cool. These will give you some other studio types of lighting. You just download these, drop these into the Zaxworks environments folder, and then you can load them right up and keep track of them. Okay, so that's where the image-based lighting is. Ambient occlusion, like I told you, is right over here. You just turn it on, and then you can set the distance or size or softness. Again, watch the sneak peek to see a more descriptive version of this. Shadow map size. When you're showing soft shadows, you can get to where, let's see, I guess I just deleted the ground, didn't I? So let's make another ground. So if we have this guy on, and let's take him and move him down. Oh, I've got auto render on, so I can't see. Okay, let's take this guy and go to object mode and just tweak him down into position. About like that. Okay, so now you see it's sitting on the ground, but it really doesn't look like it. So having ambient occlusion or shadows turned on is always a good thing, because it makes your stuff look so much more realistic. So we go to the animation section and we add a light, and then we come down here to our light track, pick light number 1, and then go to the object controls, and then we can turn on shadow casting. Okay, if your shadows don't show up right away, it means that they're not turned on in OpenGL mode. If we do a render test, you'll see that the shadows are there, but they're not showing up in OpenGL. Also, if I turn on auto render, you'll see they're going to be there, and they appear like this. Now I've got it on ray trace, which means it keeps switching to OpenGL, but if I put it to OpenGL renderer, you see it's moving around with interactive shadows all the time. If you have older hardware, this can start to chunk along a little bit too much. So what you do is this: you go to preferences, and you come down here where it says use GL shadows in draft or final mode. So you can turn the shadows on or off right there. If your shadow map size is set too high, let's see, and that's in the lighting globals. So when we come over here and we go to lighting globals, if the shadow map size is set really, really high, that will really start to slow things down. So when you turn on auto render, you're going to get this message here that says you're using a very large shadow map. Do you want to lower it? And this will not affect your final rendering, but it does affect the preview speed right here. So you can do this, and then that lowers it to 1000, and then you get your interactive lighting, so you see how easy it is to set things up. So that's a major thing to realize about shadow map size. This is only affecting, though, OpenGL shadows. When you have it on ray trace rendering, you don't use a shadow map, so that doesn't apply. It just creates awesome shadows all the time. So shadows, shadow maps, image-based lighting. What else do we have? We've got materials. Sure. So when we go to materials, let's see. I'm going to turn off this track just so it doesn't waste any rendering time for us. And I'm going to also turn off auto render. So first of all, let's see, dealing with the materials. Whoops. I've got it playing back now. Isn't that special? So here we go. When you're looking at this guy, you see how beautiful the textures look nowadays. We've created a new type of mapping which does this perfect mapping around the edge with no seams. Okay, we call this UV normalized. So when you apply material, if you apply it to text, it does UV normalize by default, so you don't even have to worry about it. But you come down here to the mapping style. We still have the old styles if you want those, but you'll see that if you choose like UV fit, it'll sort of smear one picture all the way around the outside edge. That was the old style. No good. So UV normalize now creates this really beautiful mapping around the outside edges of your text as well as everywhere else. So that's a major improvement to get your stuff looking better, faster, and without having to lift your finger at all to do it. Okay, when it comes to the materials themselves, if we load this guy in, you see now we've got this new thing down here called normal mapping. This is a normal map, these sort of blue and pink pictures. So you can download these materials. You can also use programs like XNormal to generate them out of existing pictures. If you turn the mapping off, you see how this looks really flat. Okay, but when you turn normal mapping back on, you see it makes it look much more sort of, I don't know how to say it besides real. You know, it makes it look luscious. So adjusting the bump will increase the amount of bump these guys are using. The problem with fine detail though is watch out for the shivering. If you increase the bump too much, then when it's in motion, you might get a lot of jitter in the map itself. It's just one of those things to watch out for. So if you do bring the bump down a little bit, you'll still get most of the effect that you're looking for without any of the problems. So let's see. So that is our normal mapping. We also have a new thing down in here called IBL reflectivity. That's right there. So when you're using an image-based lighting, map lighting will use a picture loaded in here. IBL reflectivity will load in a picture from your IBL lighting globals, which is use this right here. And then you've got one material, one picture that appears on everything. It's a global reflection. We also have ray trace reflectivity down here, which is not turned on right now, and of course only shows up when you're using the ray trace renderer. Okay, so and ray trace reflectivity is the one that does all the inter-object reflections. So if you want to see objects appear in the faces of other objects, that is the one to use. So those are a couple of new material type things going on. We've got tons of lighting and tons of camera. Let's look at the camera focus right now. If we go back over to our animation and add a camera track, let's just add a pose right here. We need at least one pose to be able to get to the camera controls. And here's camera focus down here. Now the way the camera focus is going to work is you need to pick a distance away from the camera and then how much blur is going to appear. So if we turn the blur up right now, I've got snap on, don't I? So let's turn that off and we'll put that down right there. See, got to use that feature already. Don't you love that? Alright, so if we put it right there, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this, which will set the hopefully set our camera distance sorry, our focus distance. I'm going to really reduce this and I'll turn this off. So now our focus distance is set low and I'm going to turn the rendering up really high. So now we'll turn on, there you go. So with auto render on, you see you're going to get the blur down there. So let's really increase the blur and decrease the focus range to something pretty small. So now you see as we move the focus distance closer to the camera or further away from the camera, you can see how the objects are going in and out of focus. So that is super cool. The first version out, we don't have an indicator. We're going to be adding an indicator soon, so you don't have to just sort of look at it. But things progress and grow one step at a time. In the meantime, that's how you get to the camera focus controls. You have to add a camera pose first. Just do add camera pose. And then once this is here, the camera is not animated. It just gives you some way of sort of like clicking on it and getting to the camera controls themselves. So that's pretty easy. Now, the really big stuff is in the instancing and the control of objects themselves. And you get to those from the object poses. So you click on one of the dark blue guys, and then you're going to be able to get to all the new controls for randomization and instancing. Now instancing looks really simple. It's just this one little guy right here. You know what? Let me reset this. Yeah, reset all. That's fine. And you know what? I'm going to reset this track to get rid of it. Leave everything right there. Okay, so that goes like that. And I still have camera focus turned on, so let's turn that off because that's always going to slow things down a tiny bit, and who needs the tiny bit on a really old computer? So let's see. Okay, and it's playing back. Isn't that nice? Okay, come back over here. Alright, so here we go. Now, let's look at some of the stuff that, you know what, let me delete this light track too. Delete this track, yes. Yeah, let's add that back in. Get a little bit more interesting lighting. Nah, that's okay. We'll just delete it. Okay, so here we go. Now, object track 1, object track, what's that? That's the ground. We don't need the ground. Delete that too. Yes, thanks. Okay, good. So we're all cleaned up. And we're ready to start instancing. So the way you do it with instancing, you just come over here and you say, okay, turn it on. And it's now creating a bazillion more triangles. You see, the number jumped up right there. If we turn that off, we've got a low number, and when we turn it on, it becomes a high number. Of course, they're not going anywhere. They're not being distributed. So what we can do is this. We can take these guys and we can distribute them around a circle. So this is where the distribution controls come in. We've added, if you're familiar with this menu, we've added a ton of new stuff, and a lot of it's 3D now. So we've got different types of circles, different types of spheres, squares, cubes, and then 3D objects, which means you can actually put objects onto other objects and make them look really, really cool. So this is a fanned circle. You'll notice that everything sort of fans away from the center point. If we pick a matched circle, see all the objects go nice up and down. So, but if we pick circle fanned, we can then, adjust the rotation of each one of these guys, or we can even randomize the rotations or randomize their positions, like this, right? So a little bit of random position, a little bit of random rotation. Definitely watch the sneak peek on this because it goes into a lot more detail, but that's how you get to them, from here and here and here. Okay? Now, resetting all this back to the beginning, let me show you what's happening. Okay, so right now, all those letters are just animating are just being instanced as individual letters. If you want more, you just turn up the number. If you want less, yeah, you get the idea. Okay, what we're also got some funny numbers in here too. Great. All right, so now that looks better. So right now you can see we're creating 9 instances of these things, and they're all being applied as individual letters. So what if you want them as words? Well, here's what you do. Turn off instancing for the time being and go over here to where it says text block number 1. Click on this and do animate by word. This has been there all along. But a lot of people just don't know about it. So if you select animate by word, look what happens. It groups everything into a word. And now when you turn on the instances, you end up with a whole bunch of individual words. So let me increase the size. And we're calling PA8 a word. And let's see here. Circle fan, we can, if we rotate these guys like this, a little bit like that, and then we can increase the number of instances. We've got lots of great stuff going on. So that's animating by word. If I typed in several words, I can even alternate through the words. I can have as many different instances in this menu as I want, and then animate them by word, by line, by character. I can have anything. I can mix and match it. Boy, there's going to be a ton of tutorials dealing with all the variations that you can do with this because it is so doggone fun. Anyway, so there we go. That's a really quick idea of how all this fun happiness works. Instancing here. Let's see. Randomization over here. That's sort of it. That's all the further I want to get right now because this introductory walkthrough is getting too long the way it is. But you get the idea, right? Camera focus by cameras. Instancing over here. There's different types of instancing too, which we'll go over in other details. This is your major list, and boy, even everything about the program is so much faster now. It's not only rendering faster. Let's see if this will work. Here we go. We've got, yeah, look at that. Look how fast this is working. See, this is now final quality, and it's moving it around yeah, it's moving it around in real time, on a really old computer. So what can you say? The program's just awesome. You'll love ProAnimator 8. There's going to be tons more that we're going to add too. I just can't wait to see what people do with this. There is so much fun and so much more stuff that you can do with it. So check it out, download it now, go off and upgrade or buy it, and then start, pays for itself. So you will have so much productivity, you just gonna shake yourself once you start using it about how it was ever any other way. Ha! So ProAnimator 8, check it out now.